A very good evening and welcome to the latest Facebook Live, which we're discussing the rules of slurry and manure spreading. We are trying new technology tonight, so please do bear with us. There'll be a lot of screen changing, but hopefully that will be seamless. For those that do not know me, my name is Will Handel, Head of Agriculture at Slatted Taylor Hunt, and I'm very pleased to be here to set the scene for you this evening. It's certainly apparent that there is an increasing pressure on livestock businesses to avoid diffuse pollution, and evidently the farming rules for water introduced in 2018, which were designed to simplify matters, have arguably complicated things further. There are a number of factors which have made such an important and relevant subject for the farming community. Increased reports of the Environment Agency doing inspections and indeed the failures that come from that, the enforcement of non-spreading restrictions and the resulting need for storage, and the huge costs associated with acceptable storage. And whilst grant funding has been loosely suggested, there's nothing currently in place at present. We're very pleased to be joined tonight by representatives from the Environment Agency, and we're very, very grateful for them taking the time to join us this evening. John Cousins will lead the discussion shortly, but he's also supported by a number of his colleagues who I'd just like to introduce briefly at this stage, and I'd ask, they will come on the screen shortly, just ask if they could confirm the catchment areas that they cover, as I think that may be helpful for the audience that we've got tonight. Starting firstly with Nicola Rumsey. Nicola, can you just confirm the area that you cover, please?
Yeah, evening. I'll be working on the Axe, I am working on the Axe with John Cousins. That includes a bit of the Yardley, the Unborn Brook, so the smaller rivers around the Axe. And I will occasionally do a bit of work on the Otter.
Brilliant, thank you. We also have Joe Fundry.
I don't actually cover a catchment. I am the Senior Environment Officer for Agriculture across Devon and Cornwall, so not actually attached to the project, but obviously with agriculture as one of my specialisms, that's why I'm listening in this evening.
Brilliant, thank you, Joe. Sam Fenner.
Hi, yeah. I'm covering the Colne, and at the moment I'm kind of in the upper to mid Colne, so around the Hemyock to Colmstock area.
Brilliant, thank you. Harry Chance.
Hello, yes, I'm covering the Torridge catchment and sort of from Oakhampton up, and I've got a colleague who actually hasn't joined us tonight, but Sadie Rose. And we're in the Torridge catchment.
Brilliant, thank you. And Catherine Lockwood. Oh, I think you might be on mute, Catherine.
Hi, is that better?
That's better, thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing the River Colne with Sam Fenner.
Brilliant, thank you. In addition, I'm pleased to say we're also joined by a farming panel, and that comprises James Winslade, the beef farmer from Somerset. Thank you, James. And also Will Luke, a dairy farmer from Devon. Thank you, Will. Again, we're grateful to both James and Will for their time this evening. Representatives from Natural England were due to be joining us this evening, but I'm afraid a late change has resulted in them being unavailable. But I'm sure with the wealth of knowledge that we've got this evening, we can cover all the necessary areas. So apologies for that, that was unavoidable. Finally, and by no means least, we have James Watton from Slatted Taylor Hunt, who has put all the hard work into coordinating and bringing this forum together. And James will certainly take an active involvement in the course of the next hour or so. James has also been supported by Ryan Doble, who helps us both in the Honiton office. Finally, before I hand over to John, I would just like to remind all viewers that questions can be posted throughout the course of this session, and we'll do our very, very best to answer as many of these as we can. We have already received quite a few questions already. We are time restricted. If we do get to a stage where we can't answer them all, we'll certainly come back to you all after this evening's Facebook Live. So that's enough from me. I will now hand you over to John Cousins from the Environment Agency that will lead the discussion. To you, John.
Yeah, good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming along. So just a brief background about me. So I'm a livestock farmer too. So we've got sheep and a beef suckler herd, and we farm near Tavistock on the edge of Dartmoor. So pretty much I've been working for the Environment Agency for 20 years, and I've done quite a few farm visits in that time. I've been working in the River catchment mainly for the last 6 years, but my wealth of knowledge that I think that I probably have has taken me to all parts of Devon and Cornwall over that time, and I've dealt with many situations and many farmers. So that's pretty much what I've done over the last 6 years, like I say. So we'll probably move on a little bit and get cracking.
Good. Like, yeah, the first thing really, John, is can you sort of provide a bit of background in terms of where we are in terms of the farming rules for water, and probably rule one about what storage requirements people have and how that affects where they can spread. That's probably the big question initially.
Yeah, yeah, it is absolutely the biggest question, and one which I get confronted on a daily basis. So basically, the farming rules for water came in 2000, as you rightly say, and they are pretty much the codes of good agricultural practice made law. So there's nothing new there really. It's just been brought into legislation. So rule one is proving to be quite an issue for a lot of farmers, and dare I say it, probably the farmers that don't have a lot of storage. Slurry storage is a big issue for a lot of people, and I've dealt with many farmers that don't have enough slurry storage and taken them through that process to try and achieve compliance. Our visits are driven by water quality targets, and we're trying desperately to achieve that, those improvements that we need to get, and desperately trying to work with farmers to get there through a number of different mechanisms. But the rule one is difficult, and I've answered many questions on that, and I've done several sessions with the NFU, which you may have seen me on, trying to answer some of those questions. I don't know whether you want me to, at this stage, to go into specifics or just keep things fairly general.
Like,
really.
If you could summarise, like rule one, what that actually means in terms of how it's defined, that would be, for start. So, because I would understand of that restricts your spreading of slurry and manures to where there is a crop need only. Is that? Yeah,
that's basically it, James. Yeah. So you must spread nutrients to meet crop and soil need. So it's not like an MVZ. There are no fixed dates. There is flexibility in that, but we know through science and research that a lot of nutrients are getting into the environment because of winter slurry spreading, for a number of reasons. But as time has moved on, and fertilizer prices are increasing, that this is becoming, and my farmers that I've dealt with in the Axe will probably vouch for it, that that slurry storage is a massive investment. I know exactly how much it costs, and it's a huge stretch for a lot of farmers to be able to achieve compliance. And the way things are going, slurry storage, not only with the farming rules, but it's looking, when the SAFO regs get overhauled, that slurry storage is going to move towards 6 months too. So that's a big ask of a lot of farmers and huge investment too.
Yeah, so there's sort of this. I've always seen there's two elements together. There's the SAFO regulations that farms producing slurry have to have a minimum of 4 months slurry storage. That's one side of things, and the other is the farming rules for water, which prevent the spreading of slurry during the winter months, unless there's a crop need, which effectively forces that they have to have that storage ability. That's correct, I believe?
Yes, that's exactly right. And the soil that we have in the southwest, it's a high rainfall area, and some of the soils that we have here in the southwest are tricky to farm. The heavy soils are problematic in some ways, although they grow grass very, very well during the autumn and winter months, and going into spring, depending on what the weather conditions are like, they can be very difficult to farm without causing problems and legacy problems for the future too. A lot of farmers are growing maize, and that's causing us problems too, because of the, it's a marginal area for growing maize. John Morgan may argue with me on that, but I'll take that on the chin. But it's it is marginal, and we do see big problems with maize because of late harvest and reduced land banks, because farmers aren't able to do things after taking maize off, and we get a lot of bare soil. So it is difficult. It is difficult, and I understand that.
Was there a question from James?
Yeah. If you have maize ground or overwintered stubbles and there's a cover crop on it, can you spread onto the cover crop?
A simple answer to that, James, really. Look in the RB209. Is there a crop requirement for it? And the answer is probably no, to be perfectly honest.
Well, there potentially is.
Is there?
Yeah, for the next crop as well. So you're enhancing your cover crop, which is also putting in what the soils need for your next crop.
I would disagree, James, to be perfectly honest, because I just don't see there's a crop requirement for it. As far as when I did my facts training, the only crop that requires nutrient during the winter months is oilseed rape, accompanied by a letter from a facts qualified advisor. I do get asked this question all the time, James, and I understand where you're coming from. And I often get the question of, actually, the grass does grow all year round in the southwest, and I do, and yes, it does. But the fact is that there should be enough nutrients in the soil contained already to that's sufficient for that grass growth.
But at the moment, it's a prime example. The weather is really good, so you can get manure out, not make a mess. It's not running anywhere. Whereas in the spring, potentially when you spread, we could be, having inches of rain. So it's not really, it's better on the ground now and going into the soil rather than in April where it could be peeing down with rain.
That and that is the point about 6 months storage, James, that you're going to need that to be able to comply with the farming rules. The thing is with land now is that it is often at field. I'm generalising now. I'm not being field specific, but generally fields at this time of year, soil is at field capacity. Okay, so there may be a crop need, but can the soil take it? Now, you don't need very much rain at this time of the year to produce puddles in fields, and I see it on my travels all the time. So if you have surface spread nutrients, they are very prone to running off or even volatilizing gas in. They're all greenhouse gases. So but late winter, RB209 does say late winter is a good time to apply nutrients. But the thing is with the farming rules for water is that all the other rules apply too. So land is very prone to compaction at this time of year, and you don't have to apply much weight to it for that to happen. And it doesn't matter how big your tyres are, it still happens. And I see it all the time.
Okay, because it's just using like a standard dairy farm on a grassland sort of basis, I know, very generally speaking. If they're spreading slurry, say every week, at what point can they stop and start? Is it completely in crop need? Is there someone outside that needs to come and advise them of when they're able to spread, or is there any sort of clarity on how it can be looked at on that sort of basis, or it is very subjective? Is that where we are?
Yeah, every farm is bespoke. Every farm is bespoke. It's when you get a long, hot, dry summer and the water table is really low, and you get into the autumn and the grass is still growing really well, I don't have a problem with applying nutrients to land in the autumn. But if the soils are wet and they're waterlogged, the soil's ability to be able to absorb nutrients is small, and therefore they're going to leach away all through the winter months.
I think Will Luke had a question there.
Yes, I did. Thank you, James. It's just I'm taking a regenerative land management course at the moment, and One of the two major challenges they talk about is mitigating climate change, which clearly not losing soils and nutrients off your fields in the winter. That's causing these algae blooms in the seas and lakes is a big part of. But the second thing is adapting to climate change. And regardless of your thoughts on climate change, you know, it was 16 degrees here on Christmas Day. It was 18 degrees on other parts of the country. It feels like climate change is on us already. And John, perhaps when you did your facts training those years ago, we've changed since then. You know, the environment's changed and we have to change with it. And if there is, I mean, is there ever going to be a justification of potentially using, you know, autumn and winter slurry or FIM applications if we can prove that our crops are growing?
Do you know what, Will? I think the economics, forget the legislation, I think the economics are going to answer that question for us, because you see response from applying nutrients to crops, you know, in the growing season. You know, you apply slurry to land in early March, you'll get a much better response, you know, generally. Not, I'm taking a 10-year average, not a specific year. But if you take a long-term average, you'll see response. And, you know, we all know, we've all spoken to our agronomists, we all know that fertiliser is never going to be less than £500 a tonne again. And the economics are going to drive that. So you guys are going to need to make the absolute maximum from your slurries and manures. And that is why you are so wise to invest in slurry storage now, rather than trying to justify winter applications.
Yeah, there's 2 points I'd like to just come back to you on that, John. You know, we're talking about the environment here. And if we're building massive 6-month concrete structure slurry stores, there's a lot of embedded carbon in that. I mean, concrete is not good for the environment.
No.
And even at the price of £500 a tonne, compared to spending £150,000, £200,000 on a slurry store, a bit of winter dung application still seems really cheap.
I don't have an issue with FYM, Will. I do not have an issue with FYM. You know, get it on in the autumn. It's the slurries, it's the high readily available N manures. And everybody talks about nitrogen, but actually I think the big elephant in the room is phosphate. And that's what all of our rivers are failing for. So for me, you know, nitrogen will take care of itself because of the economics, but it's phosphate and legacy phosphate that's going to be our biggest problem, and learning how we can tackle that, because I'm seeing a lot of dairy farms with soil indices of 4s and 5s for phosphate, and they struggle to get those levels down, and that's going to be the problem for a lot of farmers, because, you know, as we discussed with the farming rules for water, you have to have agronomic justification for supplying slurries and manures, and you can't justify applying phosphate, which is a byproduct of slurry, on a field that has got soil indices of 4 and 5 per P, and I have seen them higher too. So it's going to be a big problem for us, and especially here in the southwest too, where we have a lot of rainfall, because that phosphate is getting into the system, overland flow, and through ground flow too, through flow. So there's big problems there for us to tackle, and one that we need to address quite quickly. And just as a side note of that, I've just started working with a local feed company, trying to look at concentrate, because a lot of farms are buying phosphate in the cattle concentrate, and that's coming out the other end of the cow and ending up on land, when actually most farms have enough phosphate in their silage and don't actually need to have it added to their cattle cake. So that's something that we're looking at. So trying to get farms P neutral or even negative, so we can start to get those P indices down, so they can justify spreading that really good product of slurry onto the land and getting maximum benefit from it.
I think we're going to jump ahead of you, James, for a second. We've had a couple of questions, quite a few come through Facebook. Will Evans, it's quite interesting. If you aren't looking at sort of housing cattle and dealing with the slurry, are people allowed to outwinter cattle on land and take all of the slurry collection out of the loop? What would be your thoughts?
So yeah, is the answer to that. But I mean, outwintering, as you know, in the southwest comes with its problems, and you've got to be fairly smart to be able to do that, to not cause problems or damage your own land during that process. Soil erosion is one of the rules, farming rules. So and we've been taking action on that too. But of course, we have a crossover currently with the RPA and cross compliance too. So soil erosion for us is slightly different than the RPA, but there is a big crossover there as well. So you need to be really careful on how you do that, but it's not illegal, and some people successfully do it, and it's a good alternative to slurry storage. But all of this stuff must form, and again, on another side note, is that nutrient management plans are going to become a big focus. We'll probably talk about the slurry storage grant in a moment, but having a good, robust nutrient management plan is going to be key to future farming, and that will probably be part of the slurry storage grant too, is that farms will need to demonstrate that they've got a very good nutrient management plan in place.
Okay. One for Thomas Berry. Can we put slurry on where we're going to plough behind it for the next crop?
Yes, is probably, there's caveats with it, but by and large, yes, because one would assume that you're going to be that you're not ploughing yet. I don't know, depending on what the crop is, but I mean, I've seen some spring cereals going in now. But yeah, I would say that's to incorporate crops now, to incorporate in the soil for crops now.
So potentially, is there a solution there to a certain extent then for people to export to arable land?
Yes.
And that to be ploughed straight in?
Yeah, muck for straw has been around for a little while, and that. So some of my farms in the Axe do that currently with that have slurry separators where they keep the separated slurry housed and keep it dry, so it's cheap to transport, and there's muck for straw deals going on.
Okay. Did you want to jump in with your question, James?
It was just what types we are. Obviously, we're beef, so we have farmyard manure. We also have chicken manure. I was looking at getting digestate in as well. So, is there a caveat on any of those? Is it purely slurry, or
So you need to do material analysis. You need to know what's in it, and if you've got material analysis, you talk it through with your agronomist, and there's a crop and soil need for it, then use it, but just apply it at the right time. That's all, so it doesn't end up in the wrong place. Common sense stuff, really.
And just one other thing, and it's a slight aside, is I'm on the drainage board, and obviously we have a lot of sewage released from sewage farms in watercourses. And, we're being told we've got to do this. When is that going to stop? Whenever we have rain, Taunton's getting bigger, Bridgewater's getting bigger, but none of the infrastructure is getting any better.
No, that's a huge topic, and one that's under very close scrutiny now. There's no real. I'm not trying to duck your question because it's a really relevant question, and I get it too all the time. But as a ballpark figure, agriculture is probably responsible about 70% of P getting into watercourses, depending where you are. We know that. But 30% is still a hell of a lot. It's still a hell of a lot, and it's going straight in. Phosphate, some works, and I speak for the Axe that the sewage treatment works at Kilmington's got P stripping on it because it discharges straight into the Trevor side. The discharge limits are very strict. So it does have phosphate stripping on it, and works, increasingly are going that way too. But it is a problem, and it is very difficult. And it's difficult. I'm not defending the water companies. I spend my life regulating them and prosecuting them for non-compliance. So I totally get what you're saying. But there is room for improvement. But there's a legacy of infrastructure associated with water companies, and they just don't have the money to be able to update all of that infrastructure. It's just not achievable. So there is, there are legacy problems there too with infrastructure, and some of the smaller works, I mean, some of them just have electricity to them, and and so you're very limited on what you can do. But that's it really. I don't know that I can really answer that question any better than that, really, without getting into specifics.
Going on, sort of, John, there's a question on the screen from Fraser Price about planning permission for a new store and sort of how that would work. Obviously, you've got officers who are sort of actively, well, certainly looking for problems and non-compliance. If you've got farmers who are non-compliant and they're trying to get themselves in the right position, but they're struggling with planning permission, they're struggling with landlord's consent and anything like that. What's your sort of take on that from an environmental sort of going forward?
I'll probably get wrapped over the knuckles for this, but planning is a nightmare. It's a nightmare and difficult, and it's getting increasingly difficult, especially those of you who are near sensitive receptors. Earthbank Lagoons, which we touched on earlier about carbon footprint. I'm a great fan of Earthbank Lagoons, huge fan, always have been. Because low carbon footprint, they're very good for tenant farmers, because when tenant farmers leave, they can just backfill, but they're coming under very close scrutiny, because they're going to be difficult to cover for ammonia emissions, and depending on what bedding system you're on, they're going to be difficult too. I've moved off subject a little bit, but planning is a nightmare, and one that we get regularly caught up with. And to answer your question is that if farmers have got problems with slurry storage, and they're actively seeking to address that problem, then we're more than happy to work with. It's beyond their limits to be able to control planners, and I think planners are definitely an issue.
Thank you very much. This looks like a fairly technical one. You mentioned volatilizing gases. Surely there would be less emissions at lower temperatures, such as now.
Yeah, possibly, but it's down to agronomics, isn't it? You need to justify applying now. And as I see more and more dribble bars and trailing shoes around now, it's improving. And I mean, I'm not a scientist. Gas emissions are probably, I don't deal with on a regular basis, but if they're less now, then so be it. I mean, we're getting to mid-February, and you can start applying nutrients now. And if it's not gassing as much, then that's more nutrients to your crop, because if you can smell slurry and it's strong, that's all the nutrient going into the atmosphere. If you can't smell it and it's then that's all good.
Okay. Just to jump with another question, John, we've mentioned sort of about new stores and that sort of thing. I think the question we get a lot of is, if someone's currently non-compliant, they know they haven't got 4 months slurry storage, and this is the direction of travel, what should they be doing now? Because there's murmurings of a grant scheme. What should those people do? Should they be engaging with you, getting planning? Or should they be waiting for someone to come and help them? What's your advice on that front?
My biggest advice with slurry storage is do not bury your head in the sand. Do not bury your head in the sand. Slurry management, if you haven't got it under control, can make your life a misery. And I'm sure there are farmers here that are spreading during the winter months. And I've seen it all over the years, firing over hedges and all the other, it can, if you haven't got enough storage, it can make your life a misery. So don't bury your head in the sand. There is help out there. I'm not necessarily, we haven't got the best of reputations in the world, but there is help and advice out there. There are lots of advisors out there that can help you. I'm always happy to try and help. You can contact me via James or Will if you'd rather remain anonymous, but please don't bury your head in the sand, because you're going to need to sort it. Everything is going that way. Red Tractor, all of them. We're getting farms now that are asking us for evidence to supply to their farm assurance supplier. To demonstrate that they are compliant and they can with the environmental legislation. So don't bury your head in the sand. Slurry storage makes it stacks up. economically, and it's just a big investment, but just you need to get on it, and nutrient management plans too. But there, like I said, there is lots of help out there, and there's things that are available on the internet to calculate slurry storage that are easy to use, and calculating rainfall data and all the other things is all built into those programs, so you can work out. But get some help, get your advisor involved, and we're there to help as well. Like I said, we haven't got the best of reputations, but we'll do our level best to help you.
Okay. There's a question that's come in from Rupert. Would it be better to have a rainfall-related spreading date rather than a blanket ban?
It's just difficult, isn't it? With a rainfall, it's just difficult because everybody's different. It depends whether you live up the top of the hill or down the bottom, or whether you live in Tavistock where I do, because we get a lot of rainfall here compared to East Devon. So it just would be so difficult, and it would be just so much down to nuance where you live, and to be able to have that sort of information would make it very, very complicated.
Okey-doke. We've sort of touched upon it a little bit in terms of what people should be doing, and there might be some help and that sort of things. We've used to a certain extent the schemes currently through stewardship and catch incentive funding to do certain bits, which you might want to touch upon. But equally, there's murmurings of the slurry investment fund. Is that going to solve some of everyone's problems? Is there going to be funding for everything? What would your thoughts be on that?
Right. So I've been trying to talk to DEFRA this week. I sit on the EA steering group for the Slurry Investment Fund. So it is really complicated. And I think DEFRA have found the whole thing much more, complicated than what they thought it was going to be. It puts us in a very difficult position, and they are, as they go along this journey, they are finding that it's not going to be easy, because where do you excuse me, where do you target the grant? Who's going to be eligible? They're going to be priority areas. So what I can say is that there will be a slurry storage grant in the autumn, as I hear it, in September. As far as I know, it will be open to all farmers, but if it is overly subscribed, then farmers and their sensitive receptors will get priority. The grant will be for new stores, and they will be ammonia emissions ready stores too, and they will have 6 months storage. I think it will probably be for concrete structures. It will be for tin tanks or cylindrical concrete stores or metal stores. We call them tin tanks, but and also under discussion, as we've touched on earlier, will be Earthbank Lagoons. Now, a lot of the farms that I regulate in the ACS have put in Earthbank Lagoons, and they have been scoped out by Bob Watson, mainly ex-ADAS advisor. So they've been scoped out really well. They've got planning, and they've been built as described in Series 759, and they are SAFO compliant. So I don't have a problem with Earthbank Lagoons, providing they meet all the regulations. And they are structures that only a lot of farmers can afford to put in. So I don't have a problem with them, and I'm trying to convince DEFRA of that.
Brilliant. We have got a comment through Facebook. What counts as farmyard manure that can be stored in a field? I guess that is the sort of stackable argument, but I do get asked that quite a bit, to be honest.
Yeah, if you can stack it, it's FYM, farmyard manure. If it's sloppy or runny, it's slurry, and you need to store it. And bear in mind it needs to be subjected to rainfall. And I do try and encourage farmers to cover their FYM when they use field heaps. I know it can be a bit of a ball ache sheeting it down and putting tyres on top, but you do reduce the ammonia or the nitrogen losses considerably, and it is a much nicer product to spread. So as long as it's stackable, and it meets all the other things, 10 meters away from a water course, and that includes land drains, then fine. It can go out in field heaps, providing it doesn't cause pollution, but it has to be stackable.
Okie doke. I think you've probably answered that, but are we allowed to have a big field heap of FYM out on the ground?
There's no stipulation on how big the heap is, providing it doesn't cause pollution. Then that's fine.
Okie doke. A few other questions we've had sort of through. Specifically on spreading, we've obviously mentioned that as being sort of timing for that. And is there any argument for the method to which things are spread being sort of more suitable in terms of people using a trailing shoe or dribble bar opposed to those, the splash plate and so on?
Splash plate will go at some stage. There's no doubt about it. It will go at some stage. But the grants for trailing shoe and dribble bar, etc., have been around, and a lot of farmers have taken advantage of that, and rightly so, because it's much better. So high trajectory spreading has gone for a while. So, but basically, keeping low trajectory spreading is keeping the nutrients low. Splash plate spreading has been an issue in years gone by because it's contaminating the grass, and so farmers have not used it during the summer months because they don't want it contaminating the grass. But of course now with dribble bars and trailing shoes, you can apply it during the summer months now without causing too many problems. So that's the preferred option, and that's the way it's going, and that's why the grants have been there to encourage people to go that way.
Okay. Just one question through. What's your thoughts on slatted tanks under cubicles and how they meet the new emissions rules? Probably sort of leading on from that, John, would be comments on covering lagoons going forward and stores.
Yeah, so slatted floor systems, I mean, I've not seen that many recently. They were well in fashion and, not very long ago, but I've seen a lot less of them now. So the slatted floor systems will come in to the ammonia emissions, and Natural England, I believe, have been offering grants for like a flap system to go in between the slats, so it allows the pats to go down through and the liquids to go down through, and then they pop back. They're spring loaded and they pop back. So that is how they will be controlled in slatted floor systems. Slatted floor systems, do I like them? If I was putting in storage, I probably wouldn't. But it's down to individual needs and circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So, someone's just come through. Will the grants be a percentage of the total cost, or are they going to be 100% of cost?
No, as far as I know, they're going to be 50%.
Do you know what those costs include? Are you able to say what those costs include?
So it will be more than just actual storage itself, because agitation is a big thing. So top agitation on tin tanks is a problem. So having a cover on it. So I think there'll be a grant for side agitation, for installing side agitation. I think the grant will also cover covers, because a lot of farms are borderline for the full month storage, but with the rainfall that we have in the southwest, I think a cover will give a lot of farms an extra month's storage. So there's a lot to be gained, and also it reduces the ammonia emissions too. So you're getting a bit more bang for your buck there, or definitely are. So I think the new grant will cover covers too.
Okay. And in terms of the fund, what you're going to fund, or what, I know there's a lot of sort of unknowns, but people that haven't got, say they've got a month's storage now, so they are non-compliant, will they be able to apply for funding? Is there expectation they will, or?
I think they probably will, actually, yeah, which is kind of gone against the grain for us, really, because farmers that have invested in storage over the years, have become compliant and they're not breaching the farming rules, it's going to be a sour pill for them to swallow, really. If farmers who've been non-compliant really pretty much 30 years with the SAFO regs are now going to get some money towards a slurry store. But we're not in charge of grant aid. DEFRA do that job. So we can only offer what we think to them and advise accordingly. But it is going to put us in a difficult position with some farms where we've asked them to put in storage quite recently. But we'll see how that pans out.
Okay. Is there anything further from James or Will? Any other comments? I've just had a question jump in through Facebook. This country is a net importer of phosphate, so we have to stockpile it on farmland. Could we design a suitable way of exporting it to become phosphate neutral? Even a shared slurry pipeline from the West Country to the east, so the Arable boys can use our great resource that we can't.
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, to put it in areas. Yeah, it would be great, really, to be able to do phosphate trading. A great idea, but I don't see the economics of it stacking up quite, really.
No, fine. So in terms of actual spreading, that's probably the bit that we've probably not gained the clarity on so far tonight, and that's very subjective, farm by farm, crop by crop. But as a general theme, your view is winter spreading is only likely to be suitable on oilseed rape. Would that be?
Yeah, that would be pretty much about it. But I mean, spreading on land during November, December, and January, is just. I just don't know why you'd want to do it, to be honest. What the justification of that would be, unless you don't have enough storage. I appreciate it's difficult for some people because the SAFO regs specify that you need to have 4 months slurry storage, and you look at the 4 winter months, and if you get a tricky autumn, a wet autumn, maybe combined with a wet spring or just one or the other, it can make. And we've all been there where we think actually it's a really nice dry time like we've had now, but if spring is really late and it's wet and cold, I could actually do with an extra 2 months storage. So to be able to create a decent freeboard now would pay dividends later on. But as I said, that's probably one of the main reasons why the SAFO regs are going to be overhauled at some stage, and storage will go to 6 months to try and address that problem.
Okay. Did Will have a question?
Yes, thank you, James. It was just to say, if we're all going to go out and build these stores, whatever they are, I mean, I can't get a builder to fit my bloody kitchen at the moment. So how are we going? There's COVID's put the pressure on the supply chain towards, we've had cement shortages, we've got builder shortages. There's only so many companies out there building these stores. Even if we all decide to do it tomorrow, the logistics of it, this is going to take years.
That's exactly it, Will. That's going to be a huge problem. And I'll tell you another problem that we've got. A couple of years ago, we ran a training event for contractors in North Devon and East Devon. And I reckon over those 2 events, we probably had 60 people attend them. Good contractors that I've worked with. And we discussed slurry storage with them. And to be fair to them, not one of them was really familiar of their responsibilities under SAFO regs. And Series 759, which is the document which is industry standard for constructing SAFO structures, they all thought that Syria was a place where people shoot each other all the time. They didn't actually know about the document, and all that stuff is in place for farmers to protect you from structures that could potentially catastrophically fail. You wouldn't build a house without involving the building inspector, or not, unless you're doing it somewhere that you shouldn't be. But that's why those regulations there are to protect you guys. It's not there to make your life difficult. It's there to protect you, to make sure that your hard-earned cash that you've worked a long time for is spent wisely, and what you're purchasing is going to be fit for purpose. And that will be another condition of the slurry storage grant that those structures are built to industry standard.
So going on from that, John, really, obviously the slurry investment grant is the autumn, as we see it. You and I both know the time these things take to plan, agree with yourselves, agree with landlord, whatever's needed.
Yeah.
And sort of Will's comments about getting someone to actually do the job. For a lot of people, this isn't going to be achievable for winter 2022 to 2023. What are your thoughts on what should be happening? Should people be hanging off, or what's going to happen to those people in next year if they have to spread during the winter?
It's going to be difficult. This year we had the RPS 252, which people could apply for to be able to spread slurry during the winter months, providing they didn't exceed the 5 kilograms a hectare of readily available N. But to be perfectly honest, I don't see that one being in place next year. So I think it will be down to the farmer to either approach us to say that they're going to be making an effort, or they just crack on and try and not get caught. But it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem, and you need to address it. And there's no point in hiding from it. You've got to sort it. It is going to be difficult because, as you say, there's just not going to be enough contractors. There's not going to be enough expertise, and problems with supply chain and materials is going to be a problem too. DEFRA know that. They know it, and we've drummed it into them all the time, and they're perfectly aware of that. And I think the timescales for the grants are going to reflect the problems that we've got now.
John, will a farmer be protected by taking action early, even if it's not implemented then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
As long as they can show due diligence.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Will protect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't stress that enough. Be proactive. If you've never done it before, talk to us and tell us the situation that you're in, that you're trying to do it, and talk us through, what your problems are and what you're up against.
Brilliant. We've just had an email comment through. Previous investment schemes have been grant funding for catchment areas based on poor water quality. Surely this is rewarding previous bad practice rather than providing funding for infrastructure within cleaner water areas and good practice continuing to expand.
Correct. Correct. It is. Yeah, I totally agree. Catchments of really poor water quality is a reflection of bad farming practice, and I've made no bones about it in the past that I think that process is wrong, and good farmers who are using best available techniques that have good water quality should be rewarded for that.
Okay, and sort of probably leading on from that is, I don't know, or I think it's official now that the Natural England are massively expanding their areas of investment in terms of not direct slurry funding, but the likes of roofing, collecting yards, and other works. That's something that EA are quite involved in, generally speaking. Is that something you're going to become more involved with in terms of people with problems and supporting them to get that sort of funding as well, John?
Yeah. So as we've seen earlier, we've got more officers than what we've had. We will be more involved in it as we inspect farms and we find problems, and we do the referral process to catchment sensitive farming in those target areas. If you want to go into stewardship and attract that funding, then you will need to involve us. Natural England are desperately short of staff at the moment. Even though they're recruiting, they've got management problems within the system that's preventing that from happening. And Natural England will become more reliant upon us to help try and deliver that catchment sensitive farming programme. And of course, a lot of people will be roofing over SAFO structures, and they'll need that guidance from us, and also the endorsement that's required by the RPA for those structures.
Okay, I think James jumped in
Yeah. What if you're in ELS or HLS areas and you're not actually in stewardship? You can't tap into that for big silage pits or slurry pits. Is there any other way?
Hugely frustrating, and I've been there myself. It's hugely frustrating. I can't answer that because I don't work for Natural England, and it's them and the RPA that prescribe it. But I've been there myself, and it's hugely frustrating.
But if you're sort of talking to DEFRA, and is there any way of getting it changed? Because obviously our hands are shackled. We're tied into agreements that 10-year agreements that we can't get out of and can't then move forward.
Difficult. It's difficult, and it's given other farmers an unfair business advantage over others. And I totally agree with you. And I have raised it on a number of occasions. I'm totally with you on it. It's not fair.
No. Thank you.
Just had a message through from John Gilbert. What are your thoughts on building a sort of satellite slurry lagoon? So one away from the main holding.
Yeah, crack on. Good idea. You can get slurry to offline ground or other land banks that you've got available during the winter months when you've got time to move slurry, and it's there for you in the spring when you want it. So a lot of the farms that I regulate have done that, and I've encouraged it because it just makes sense.
Yeah, okie doke. From Emma Kirk, is dirty water pile washings to be stored in the same way as slurry?
I knew that one was going to come. I knew. So that's a slightly difficult one because DEFRA several years ago made a bit of a cock up, really. But so parlour washings or very lightly fouled yard water, and I mean lightly fouled, and runoff from silage clamps, but not including silage effluent, as far as I'm concerned, is okay to go all year round, providing it doesn't cause pollution and forms part of a nutrient management plan.
So if something had been through a slurry separator, the output from that
will be slurry.
So that can't be spread.
Yeah.
Will we still be able to spread dirty water throughout the winter? You've probably just answered that, to be fair.
Yeah. So form part of your nutrient management plan and mustn't cause pollution, including diffuse.
Okie doke. And in terms of sort of rainwater runoff and all of that, basically as soon as it becomes fouled, that's slurry?
It's lightly fouled. If you look at the MVZ regs and the guidance for dirty water versus slurry there, that's a pretty good start for 10.
Right, okay. So here we go from Joe. Are you saying that the only way we can spread FYM is by having an up-to-date nutrient management plan to justify a crop need, or is there any other way to justify crop needs or requirements?
Well, I mean, FYM should form part of your nutrient management plan anyway. There's no point in spreading it if there isn't a crop need, and I don't know why you would want to anyway. I don't quite get. Is there any other way to justify crop? No, I mean it's all based on the RB209, isn't it? It's all based on crop requirement and what's contained, what are the nutrients within that manure, and what you spread in, application rate, and to match crop requirement.
Okie doke. So effectively, I think probably the bit that we might be lacking on would be people who don't have a nutrient management plan, are sort of lacking storage and so on. Where should they be going to devise a nutrient management plan? Is that something they should do themselves, or is that something you advise they outsourced? Where would you? Is that something you can advise and help people farm to farm?
No, we probably wouldn't get involved in nutrient planning. We wouldn't, to be honest. We just don't have the resource to do that. So there are lots of online programs. There's Manor MPK and Planet and others are available. AHDB is a very good place to look. So there's lots of stuff on the internet that you can use. But yeah, your agronomist, of course, will be your first port of call if you've got one, and plan it that way.
Okay. We're nearing time. Have either James or Will got any further questions?
No, I think we've covered near enough everything I wanted to sort of find out. So there isn't a set date from start to finish. Is that it's really going to be how the weather is, and as long as you can prove that there's a need for it, you can do it.
Pretty much, James. Yeah, but I mean, one thing I would say is that a lot of farmers, and I'm not being rude here or condescending in any way, but a lot of farmers don't understand what field capacity is, and you really need to understand that. And that is, whether your soil is able to take it, even if there's a crop need, if your soil can't take it, then and precision spreading is a big thing now. And as we say in the EA, there's no point in accurately spreading it if it's accurately going to run off. And I think that's a really important point to make sure. A lot of farmers have taken their eye off the ball, in my opinion, with soils, and soils are being degraded and hammered and economics are driving that. So I think it's really important that farmers move back and try and get back involved with soils, because it's such an important part of any farm, and assessing soil structure and organic matter and doing your soil analysis are all really important, and farmers really need to get back on that.
Well, I think that's going to be more and more to do with elm as well, isn't it? Going forward.
Yeah.
We'll take one final question from online. If you really want farmers to have enough storage to last 4 to 6 months, why can't they fund more slurry systems with 100% full funding?
Basically, I just don't think there's enough cash. I just don't think the country's got enough cash to do that. And in the eyes of the public, agriculture is probably quite heavily subsidised already, and I just don't think there will be an appetite to fund them 100%.
One final comment from myself would be to summarise, John. People that have got a sort of a slurry issue, or have or haven't, or don't know, basically don't bury your head in the sand. Come forward, whether it's to the Environment Agency or even if it's through us directly, and we can have a chat with you on a sort of a more anonymous basis.
Yeah.
Don't bury your head in the sand. I think that was your comments before to me.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I'll start to draw it to an end. It's certainly been an enlightening discussion and a thought-provoking discussion, really. And it's I think for many it's highlighted the significance of this particular subject, which I know that has been quite an active discussion over the last few weeks, months, and longer. Really, it's going to have an impact on many businesses, isn't it? So. We're going through a period of transition in so many ways, not just in this, but others as well. So it's certainly something that, as James alluded to, and indeed John earlier, it's not something that we can ignore. We're very grateful to everyone for that's taken part tonight, to John and his team. So thank you very much for all your time, John, and for your openness and honesty during the discussion. To James and Will, thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your questions. We know you're both very busy, so thank you for devoting the time to joining us tonight. Thank you to James as well for coordinating it, putting it together, and keeping it flowing. And of course, our own marketing team. Catherine's been busy in the background, making sure the screens are working. So thank you to her. And a final thank you to everyone that's signed in tonight. We've had a great audience, some great questions. Thank you for the interaction. It wouldn't have worked without that. So yeah, thank you to everybody. If anybody wants a chat, then do give us a call. If you ring us in Honiton, we can direct you to the relevant office. We're on 01404 462 22, and we look forward to hearing you. But as a final thank you and good night.
Good night.
Cheers.
Cheers.